Today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to for a long time. Today, I get to sit down with Sharon Eubank, someone who is not only a global advocate and humanitarian and director of humanitarian services for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but a wise voice of faith and a personal hero of mine. In this episode, we talk about how to recognize God's guidance in your life, what it looks like to rest, how to truly partner with Him. We also talk about dreaming with God, letting Him expand your vision, and trusting that those quiet impressions matter. And then we move into something Sharon knows deeply, service and giving. She shares the most important thing any of us can give, something we actually can't mess up, and she offers simple, practical ideas for how to show up right now exactly where you are without waiting for more time, money, or clarity. This conversation feels grounding and expansive at the same time. If you've been craving direction, peace, or a reminder that God is closer than you think, this one is for you. Sharon Eubank, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you.
I feel it's such an honor to have you here and such an honor to just be sitting with you. And also I feel a bit of a stewardship right now for all the women listening in who I think would love to have an opportunity to sit across the table with you. I don't take it lightly. You have been a female exemplar for me for a lot of years. And so I'm trying to channel all those women right now to say, okay, what are the questions you want to know about Sharon and who she is? We had a little discussion off camera and I asked you how comfortable you feel with asking some more personal questions. And your response was very expected, exactly probably what I would have thought you would say of, I don't think anyone wants to hear about me and that's not interesting. And let's talk about these principles. And then I pushed you a little bit. I said, I actually think there are so many women who would love to hear about you and hear about your discipleship and what has driven you to do the things you've done. And referenced an earlier episode I had with a friend, Michelle Craig, where I said, we don't get to ask these women in the scriptures questions. And I know you wouldn't put yourself up on a pedestal with an Esther or a Ruth or anyone else, but these are opportunities as female disciples to say, but how do you do it practically? When the demands of the world are on your shoulder, practically, what does that look like? And so Sharon has been so generous to say, okay, you can ask me a few, we'll see how it goes, knowing we can edit anything. But thank you for the opportunity to even ask you maybe some personal questions today. Sure. So to begin, I loved one of the stories you told in the book. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Sharon's book today, Doing Small Things with Great Love, which she just told me sold out the first printing. Huge congratulations.
Thank you.
So wonderful. I know that takes so much effort in making sure the book is good and your writing, and then also going and sharing it and using your time to go share with other people. So congratulations. But you are getting a second printing. So hopefully by the time this episode drops, people will be able to purchase the book. There's a story in the book where you talk about really hearing other people and listening to other people and not always starting thinking you know all the answers. And you talk about a man who was from Fiji, and you sat down and you had a few things that you were thinking were going to be helpful for his situation. And what did he say? What did he want to do first?
So I love this story. And one of the best things about the book was it sort of became a love letter to all these people that I've met, that have taught me so many great things. So I'm happy to talk about him. I was administering a internship program with the 3 BYUs, so BYU, Idaho, Hawaii, and Provo. And we were all working together on this, and then the students would take the class, and then they would actually go out to the field for this internship for LDS employment. And my colleague in BYU, Hawaii, it wasn't going very well. We had problems that kept coming up, and we talked on the phone, and the problems didn't get resolved. So finally, I thought, I have to go. So I flew to Hawaii, and I'm going to sit down with him. And, I've got these things on a paper that there's 6 problems that we have to talk about. And, in his very Fijian way, he's from Fiji, he sits back in his chair, and he says, Sister, he said, I don't know you. He said, we're going to talk story. This is my culture. We're going to talk story for 30 minutes before we get to whatever's on your paper. And I can remember, I'm embarrassed about this, but I can remember thinking, are you serious? We're going to talk 30 minutes, chit-chatting about this. But I learned something really important from him, because as I learned about his story, I learned about what was going on at the university, I thought, oh, that's why that's happening. There was all kinds of things that I didn't understand were going by that. And by him taking the time from that Fiji culture to be able to say, let's get to know each other a little bit better before we try and resolve problems. In my very American way, I was going to say, we've got stuff to talk about. And he said, this is more holistic and we need to trust each other a little bit more. And that was a very important learning for me. I really appreciated him.
So beautiful. And you actually gave a little bit of his accent in a really believable way. I really enjoyed
No,
that part
I
of the
shouldn't
story.
do that, but he was just
I
so
loved it.
beloved. And he and I became such good friends.
So we're going to get to that principle a little later in the episode when we're talking about how does that relate in humanitarian work, right? But I wanted to bring that at the beginning of the episode to frame out what I want to do with us a little bit. And you might roll your eyes again like you did. Like, oh, let's just not do the chit chat, because I know your life's work has been in humanitarian work. And I want to give you the platform to pass that on as much as we can in this episode. But really, for those of you listening in, I would say she's written the book literally on this. And if you're going to do it professionally and you want to go get some career or go get some degree in it, maybe you're going to go do work. But if you can't go get a degree, just read this book instead and you'll get so far ahead, right? So we won't cover everything in the book today. It's not the purpose of this episode, but we will get into a few principles to guide you listening in on your path. But truly, if you're watching this episode, you might see the book on the table. It's dog-eared. It has Post-it notes sticking all out of the side. There's so many things I took away from the book. So I would recommend that you just buy it. But we are going to begin by just talk story. That's what we're going to do for just a second
All right, let's
today.
talk story.
Okay. So I even wrote a few questions down. Just first off, tell us about Sharon Eubank. What are some things in your past that made you who you are? Any stories or experiences growing up that have made you you?
I don't, it's very hard for me to talk about myself, but the thing that I think is important to know is I am the most ordinary of women. And I started off as a very shy person. And it wasn't until I served an LDS mission that I learned how to talk to people. I'm grateful that I had that experience because it's important to me now. But if I have this kind of a career, anybody can. Anybody can do these things. And if you're going to go to school and study development and you know, people-centered learning, all of those things, there's a whole discipline around that. This book was written for people to just say, look, in my everyday life, I don't have a lot of money, I don't have a lot of time. What can I do to be powerful just in my everyday life? I'm perfect to write that kind of a book because I'm just a normal person. I fell into the job that I have. I didn't study the right things. You know, I studied to be an English teacher. I owned a toy store in Provo. You know, I had this very weird background. And the publisher, he called me and he said, I read the introduction to the book, and he said, I don't see the dots between all these different experiences that you have to get you to where you are. You know, he said, can you kind of connect the dots for me? But I'm just like everybody else. I'm just trying to figure out, I've got to have a 40-year career. What should I do? And how do I do something that's meaningful to me and you know, but I have to get paid for it and live my life. And so I did certain things that helped me, but a lot of things just came to me by happenstance. And I always say the church invested a lot in me, and they better get their investment back. I better be able to repay all of the experiences that they've brought to me. So I'm hopefully that I can do that.
What were some of the things? Connect those dots a little bit. Now, it may not be, well, I had this skills. You go into this in the introduction, but I learned this here, and then at the toy store, I learned that. But let's peel it back one more layer or add a little foundation to that. How much would you say your career was built by you, and how much would you say is built by God? And what was the interplay? And how did you recognize the pivots and different places that you went when you were finding this 40-year career or creating, or however you look at it?
It's probably 50-50. I don't know that that's true or not, but you know, I left I left Utah and I drove to Washington, D.C. without a job. And I had a spiritual niggle that that's where I should go. And I was scared to death. And as I drove across the country, everything I own in my little red Chevrolet, and I got there and I went to church, and you know, I thought, well, I'll talk to the employment person, and they said, you know, good luck, you know, let us know if we can help you. And I'm like, ugh. I talked to the housing people, and they're like, we don't know of anything, hope you find something. And there it was after church on Sunday, and I thought, I don't have any place. It was foolish, nobody should do this, but there I was. So I went to the local hospital because you can stand around in a hospital and nobody really worries about why you're there. And I used the payphone because it was, you know, obviously before phones. And I finally called a friend of mine that I had known from high school who I knew was in school there. And he said, well, we have an empty place in our apartment. You can stay here for a week until you decide what to do. But that's how my stumbling career into Washington started. But it started with, I feel like this is the next step I should take, and I'm not prepared for it, and I don't really know what to do, but I'm going to step out into the darkness and do it. And the job I got was through the Senate Placement Agency. Nobody in the federal government gets a job through the placement agency. But I went there and I took a typing test and somebody called me and I got a job. And, when I tell that story, people are like, what? How did that happen? So I can feel that the Lord was guiding me, helping me. But I had to do the legwork, to get it done too. So I think of myself in partnership with him of, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm willing to work. And if you'll guide my steps. And sometimes he does more and sometimes I do more, but it moves along.
How do you view your role in that process? What is the work that you talk about? Like, I'm willing to do the work. What does that kind of work look like?
Well, I think there isn't just single answers in our lives. There isn't just a single path for us to go. There's hardly anybody on the planet that should just do one thing. I think the Lord cares a lot about our dreams, the things that we want to do, our opinion. I don't think we're robots that he should just move around. He's in consultation with us. He wants to know about our agency. What do you want? And then when you bring him a plan, okay, I'll help you do that. I don't think the brother of Jared, he could have come up with anything. He comes up with 12 stones. I really want you to touch these. And I think the Lord says, okay, that's your plan. It'll be fine. And with my life, I think that was true. There came a time in my life when I thought, I want to take a sabbatical. I'm burned out. I want to do something different. I want to take a little bit of time. And, my employer is like, well, nobody's ever done that before. We can't hold your job. But I took this idea to the Lord and said, can you help me? I don't know exactly why I feel I want to do this. And he did. He made a path for me to leave. He made a path for me to come back. And I'm really grateful for that. I don't think he cared one way or the other if I did that, but it was important to me. And so he made that work out.
That's so liberating to hear, I think, for, again, female disciples who want to follow Jesus Christ and who want to serve and want to give, to say, but God wants me to dream. That's okay. I think sometimes we're looking for, what is the answer?
Yeah.
Tell it to me. But instead to say, what if I just took out a piece of paper and wrote down all my dreams and found the one that excited me most, like the stones of the brother of Jared, and said, well, could you touch that one? Could you put light in that one? Would that one be okay? Mm-hmm. And maybe some aren't for us, right? All of us have had dreams that aren't realized and are dashed and are broken at times. But I think to say, I think he does want us to dream, though. I think he likes that.
I was in President Nelson's office with my presidency once, and he started to say, the Lord loves, and I know, the Lord loves effort. I knew he was going to say that, but he didn't. He said, the Lord loves the unlikely. And that was really helpful to me because there's lots of things that we do, and he takes note of that, but I think it doesn't always happen in the time that we think it was going to happen or in the way that we thought. And I think in some ways he thinks it's kind of funny to surprise us and think, it's coming, you're just coming in a different way than you know. And I look back on, putting blood over lintels to have a destroying angel pass you by, or parting the Red Sea, all these things. I think the Lord does love the unlikely. And he wants us to know this isn't logical. I'm active in your life. I'm actually helping you, doing something that you would have never expected, because I want you to know we're in partnership. And so I really appreciate that from President Nelson. The Lord loves the unlikely.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And you can just picture him with this twinkle in his eye saying it, like he lived that. And he dreamed big.
He did.
We were coming out of kind of COVID in 2020 when President Nelson's book came out. And I had strong spiritual habits and been in great places, but I just felt, I think, the weariness of the world at that time.
Sure.
And his book for me reinfused that twinkle and that excitement and that joy of like, oh no, remember why you're doing all these things, and we're going to get reinvigorated and the world's going to open and it's getting loud again, but it's all good. It's all going to work out. And he just had that way about him. Tell us a little bit about, you talk in the book about this, and it was a question I had even before I had finished your book. It's towards the end, about rest and replenishment.
Oh.
And again, for Sharon Eubank, obviously we can think about our careers and we can think about in our family life, but what role has that played for you? And even if you'd give some specifics, and we hesitate to give specifics because everything's different for everyone, but I think it is kind of fun to hear, like, but what do you do? What does that look like?
I told this story because I had a colleague at work, and he was a great boss, but he was type A. So when he went on vacation and they'd go to Hawaii, his wife would finally get him to go. he would sit with his laptop on the beach, and she'd like, Lloyd, we're here on vacation. But he was so driven by the work that he did. And when he retired from the church, he went up and worked at the state on homelessness, and he got so much done. But he got pancreatic cancer. And so his wife called me, and I drove a couple hours down to his house. And I really appreciated having this experience from him because he knew that I have those kinds of tendencies too. So he wants to tell me what he has learned at the very end of his life. And it was so meaningful for me. He's written it down on a piece of paper that I took home. But he said, when you took that sabbatical at work and you left for that year, he said, I thought that was the stupidest thing in the world. But he said, I understand that better now. He said, there is a commandment in the Bible in Genesis that we should multiply and replenish. And everybody thinks that's about having children. But he said, I want you to know that it's about more than that, because the gospel is full of these actions and then standing back and reflecting on what I did. Or I'm going to do something, then I'm going to step back and rest, because we sleep every night. We take the Sabbath, it's one every 7 days to rest. We have these Jubilee years. He said it's built into us to do something and then replenish. And we feel guilty. He said, I spent my whole life feeling guilty about that. He said, it's a commandment. Sharon, I want you to know this, it's a commandment. And I've really taken that to heart, because I have those tendencies to feel guilty when I'm not doing anything, I'm not crossing things off my list, and I'm not active, productive. But I think as being a human being, being a child of God, is also about taking power into us so that we can then replenish it. Put it back out. And so for me, and I'm not different than other people, the temple, nature, my family, reading, sometimes just not doing anything are important ways for me to take energy back in when I'm giving a lot of energy out. And, for some people, if you're the wife of a young family, you're a mom of a young family, you've got all kinds of demands on your time that you don't control. And you can barely go in and take a shower before somebody's not knocking on the door. But there are other times in your life when that replenishment comes. And we need to help each other take those times. Otherwise, our mental health suffers, and our families suffer too. We have a right to be able to replenish, and the Lord wants to help us do that.
I love that. And I love that you gave a few specifics. Just for fun, will you tell us some of your favorite books? And they can just be story. They don't have to be anything like nonfiction or productive or how to make your life better. I feel like we're kind of cut from a little similar cloth, if I can be so presumptuous to say that to Sharon Eubank. But that is me. And I think that's part of the reason why I asked that question is like, if there's a thing to do, I am in my best place. God, give me a thing to do. And I'm learning he loves me enough to also say, and I also just want you to feel love.
Sure.
And to feel peace. And so just for fun, what are a few favorite books from your life, or things that you love in particular, or things like that?
I don't know. I love to read. I always got in trouble when I was a kid for reading too much. I would read through recess, and then the class would start, and I wouldn't even pay attention. So they're like, Sharon, class has started. But I just loved to read. I have really eclectic tastes. I like science. I just read a great book on a biography of Alexei Navalny, who was the opposition leader in Russia. So, part of it he wrote when he was in the hospital after he'd been poisoned in Germany, and the rest of it he wrote in the penal colony when he was in prison. And just the courage of knowing that he was going to be killed, and the encouragement that he wanted to give the Russia people to believe in the beautiful Russia that we all want. I was really motivated by him. And so I really enjoyed that book. But I like all kinds of books. I like fiction. I like fairy tales. I read a lot of myths when I was a kid, Greek and Roman mythology. I just like lots of things.
How do you think that played into your eventual career?
I think for people who want to make a difference on a human level, it's good for us to be curious. I have a lot of curiosity about things that I will never be able to experience. I'll never be in a Russian penal colony. I will never have the courage to, stand up against an authoritarian regime. But to live that a little bit vicariously is really important. And I think myths and stories from other cultures, they teach us lessons, universal lessons that we can apply to something, even though, it's not about Roman mythology or Fiji or, whatever the story is. So I really like learning about how cultures are formed. And that helps me.
And what a gift for you then to visit these cultures and to have had the scaffolding of history and of cultures and of different types of people instead of going in completely blind. And you go in the book very humbly by saying, I am very blind and I don't know and I don't have the answers. And anyone who presupposes in humanitarian work to have the answers is probably on the wrong track, right? But to come in at least with that curiosity and a worldview, who knows, but maybe that was the preparation for a career in humanitarian work, that you were voracious and you was like insatiable, that you wanted to know more. And then you got to go see and do and give to some of the people you maybe read about. It's really cool.
One of the things I learned, though, and it's important for us to be curious about cultural things that we don't know anything about. And I think if you're going to do something, you should ask the people who are right there. What is it they want? What is it they need? What are their suggestions and ideas? Because coming from the outside, we won't know. We don't know the answers to that. But I think there are a lot of things that are universal. And when they tell you something, you can understand that as on a human level. And your culture may be different, your situation may be different, but everybody loves their children. Everybody has a thirst for knowledge. Everybody wants safety. And you can relate to those basic human needs, desires, loves, and wants. And that's what connects us as a human family.
And one of the best ways to develop empathy is through stories, through hearing the stories, which I love that you called this book a bit of a love letter to all the people who taught you. Having just finished it, it's like, oh, that's exactly how it reads. You love all those people. You can actually feel as you wrote about them and where they were from and their idiosyncratic ways of saying things. It was like, you could feel that. But I never, when I was explaining the book to someone else, I wouldn't have said, oh, it's her love letter to the people who had taught her. But you can also feel your empathy because you're pulling in those stories. And again, plug for reading. I have those who have listened to the podcast know I have a big love for education and literacy. And part of it is also that if you want your child to have empathy, if you yourself want empathy, no matter your age, start to read some of the books about these people. Maybe that's even a precursor to any of your volunteer work. What do I learn a little bit about the history of this place and what they've really been through? I also served an LDS mission and I was in Croatia in in 2005. I left on my mission. And my uncle had actually been one of the missionaries who opened Yugoslavia back in the late 70s, I believe. And I think because of his connection to the country, I ended up with this book in the mid-90s at the time of the war in Yugoslavia. And it was a bit like the Diary of Anne Frank, but it was a diary of a girl in Bosnia. No, she was in Sarajevo. And I had read this book and I devoured this book. But what I wish I would have done, then I received this mission call for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was floored that it's where my uncle had opened and all these things. But what I wish I would have done is taken a few weeks and really learn the history. I knew there had been a war and I knew one girl's experience. Think of the empathy I could have had I learned a little bit about the country and why they're distrusting of Americans. There's really good reasons, right?
That's right.
There's so much about who they are and how they could even understand who Jesus Christ could be that I could have done a better job had I thought of that. It didn't even cross my mind, sadly.
But I think it's true. A mission is a good experience, but a lot of people have different kinds of experience where you actually live among people and you get to know some of the things that you would never know otherwise. Because I served an LDS mission in Finland.
Oh, you did?
So this would have been, this is 41 years ago. But they were still very affected and very poor after World War II because Russia had attacked them before the war actually got going. And then they lost a third of their male population during that time. So I had a 65-year-old companion. And she said, I never got married because there's nobody my age to get married to. And people still really remember they had to pay war reparations and the economy was decimated after that time. They had refugees from a third of Finland that became part of the USSR. They had to absorb all of those refugees that came. So the president asked every family, can you divide your household goods in half and your farm animals in half and give half to one of these families coming in? And I'd hear people who had done that. And I thought about that. And I haven't told this story before, but as a missionary, it's a salad dressing bottle, and I had a hard-boiled egg, and we would use it as a little visual lesson. I'd draw a face on the egg, and I'd say, this egg can't fit through this bottle. It's just too tight. But if we can soften up this egg, and we'd talk about what would it take for our hearts to be softer, and we'd peel off the edge, and it would stick there, but it still wouldn't go through. And I'd say, it still needs one more thing. It needs the Spirit of the Lord. And I'd light a match into some alcohol in the bottom, and it creates a vacuum, and the egg would suck down, and everybody would go, whoa, it's so great. But my companion who'd lived through the war, she goes, I hate that. I said, what do you mean you hate it? It's great. She said, it wastes the egg. Because there it is, soaking up in alcohol and the soot and everything. And I thought, eggs are cheap. What do you care? We have a carton of them. But I realized from my own perspective, she's lived through a time when an egg was so precious and you'd save up all week to buy one egg. And here I am just wasting them. And I learned a lot from her, from that lived experience. And that became part of me, just like your time in Croatia became part of you. And the more we learn about the suffering and the background and the politics and why things are the way they are, I think the more empathy we have for people. And we stop trying to impose our own cultural ideas on them, and we just recognize this is their reality. How can I work with them inside the reality that they have? I think that's a critical way to start working with people if they want to have a dream and make progress.
So beautiful. I want to go we're diving into some of the principles of the book, but I want to ask one more question. And this is about a talk you gave in October of 2017 called Turn On Your Light.
Okay.
I loved this talk. I know so many women loved this talk, and men, but you talked about this prophecy given from Spencer W. Kimball. And that prophecy has been a guiding light to me in so many ways. My life has actually just taken a bit of a turn over the last 3 weeks. And again, I pulled out President Kimball's talk, and he gave two, one year and one the next. And then Russell M. Nelson also gave two to women. So I pulled those 4 out, and they've been this guiding star for me. If you'd allow me to, I'd love to, again, peel back the curtain a little and ask about the writing of that talk and what inspired you to write that talk. And you break down kind of his prophecy, and you talk about we need to be righteous as women. This was part of the prophecy. Like, if we're really going to share Jesus Christ with the world, we need to be righteous, we need to be articulate, we need to be distinct and different in happy ways. Why did you write that talk? And can you share anything about how that's impacted you in your own life?
It was the first talk that I'd ever given in general conference. This was in the women's session, and I didn't know really how to prepare a talk. So I just started praying. What is it? Because I don't dare say my opinions. What is it that you want, Relief Society women and young women to hear? And that talk from President Kimball kept coming back to me in different ways. I'd see it somewhere, and somebody would refer it. It was just that zinging of this, and I thought, well, what could I possibly have to say that would be more than what President Kimball had already done? But I was really taken with the idea that if that's a prophecy and that's still coming, what should we be doing as women to get prepared for that? And there's a lot of different scriptures and prophetic words that talk about the influence that women will have in the last days. And one of the things that is talked about is they will attract people to the gospel of Jesus Christ because they're different than everybody else. And I thought, if I were going to live that in my life, what would it be like? And then, of course, I found that story in the newspaper about the woman who had saved the people from the riptide because she was so creative and she had these skills. We don't all have those skills, but what skills do I have? What could I do? And so to apply that right now, and I think about this in my life, it doesn't matter that I'm the humanitarian director or not. If I'm just a normal person in my life, or what I do, and if I have this job or if I don't have this job, what can I do outside of my family and maybe my church circle that would attract people to good principles, that they may not have any exposure to these true principles any other way, except that they know me, or they saw something that I did, or they read something, or they listened to the podcast. What is it that I could do that would be so true or right or honest that it would attract people to this work? And those can be a million different things because we're all so different. We all have so many different skills. But it's a really important mission that I think is important for women of faith in the 21st century. What can we do to bless the world, and how can we bless other women to come help us?
I love the focus being on what I'm doing is attracting others. I think it's easy to say, how can I teach or how can I show? But what is something so genuine and authentically pulling and drawing that they just want to know and they want to see? And then the word at the end of that is that it's in happy ways. We want to be happy. That is at the core of what we're seeking. We may not know that happiness is found in faith or in a relationship with Jesus Christ, but we do know we want to feel happy. And so as we project ourselves out and hold ourselves up as a light so that people can find the light of Jesus Christ, it's a great litmus test, right? Like, is the way I portray my faith or motherhood or wifehood or career or anything else that I'm doing, does it actually look attractive, or does it feel like, wow, that is just a hard way to live and you have too much on your plate and that looks terrible? And if maybe also an invitation for women, if it feels terrible, then rethink how you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And if you're not receiving life and light from Jesus Christ in the process, maybe there's an invitation for something yet ahead for you. Because I definitely know, and I believe it was also you who said, this is one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to butcher it. So if it's you, you can correct it. I'm glad you're in the room. That faith should not be the weight that bears down on us, but it should be the wings that lift us. Is this
It's not
you?
my quote, but I really like that quote.
Okay, then I'm not sure who it was, and I'm sure I still butchered it either way. But I've thought about that my relationship with Jesus Christ isn't a weight and a burden that I'm carrying. It's actually the thing that helps me fly above the things of the world that don't actually matter, that normally would burden me and bear me down.
And I like the point that you just made, that if you are feeling miserable, it's perfectly fine to say, I need to adjust something. That's the reason I took that sabbatical from work. I wasn't doing well. I wasn't healthy enough to keep going, and I had to do something drastic to change. And whether it's drastic or a tweak, I think we can take those to each other. You can counsel with each other. We can speak to our family or our spouse, but certainly take that to God and say, I need to make a change. Help me make a good change.
And don't be afraid, I've talked about this on the podcast, to be that open with God. There is no shame in saying, God, you have said your burden is easy. You've made it, your burden is light and the way is easy. I don't feel that. Is there something I could do at this moment to feel more of that, the joy that comes from discipleship and service? And like, it's okay if you're not. Say it just like that to God. Think about if you had a great relationship with your parents or a great relationship with your children, you would love that kind of question. Mm-hmm. Yes, how can I help you? And maybe I'll even take a little more of that burden if I feel like it's just even heavier than maybe you can bear right now. How do you see this in the women that you know, and what's some advice that you would give for women who feel like living a life of faith or living a life in family relationships is just too heavy?
I think there's a lot of responsibility that we feel, stewardship. You know, we care a lot about the people in our circle and what happens to them. But I go back to that scripture that you just quoted about my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And we think that it means not heavy, that it's light. But what if it means that it's light as in glory, that my burden is the goodness of everything that will happen? That my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I'm not any wise person about things. Everybody is trying to make their life work out. But I think the more we take our problems to the Lord in prayer, and I'm a big believer in prayer. When he says the prayer of a righteous person avails much, I take that seriously. He's going to respond when people come to him. There's like 26 times in the scriptures when he said, come unto me, seek and you will find, knock and I'll open it up to you. That's his greatest. I don't think he says anything more often than that. He wants us to come to him. And then when he gives us little ideas that we're scared to implement or something, if we have the courage to be able to do it, we'll change things, and we'll have to have hard conversations with people. We'll have to do things that we've never done before, but it will make our burden light. It will turn it into something glorious and redeeming for other people, and it will channel the light of God into our lives better. And that's all I want. That's the thing I want.
I had an experience a couple of weeks ago where I was praying over someone that I love and had a little awakening in the middle of my prayer that mostly what I had been saying was, I'm really worried about this person. Mm-hmm. And you know what it's like when people come to you and say, I'm just so worried and I just don't know if this is going to work out. And then you kind of try to talk to them after and they just leave. They just really wanted to tell you they were worried. Uh-huh. They just needed to leave their burden at your feet that I'm just really worried. And I had this feeling like, what if instead you prayed for what they need? And you prayed to be enlightened. And I'm sure I've learned this lesson in times past, but it struck me in a different way. And so I started to pray for this person, and I know they need this. And I know this is a struggle, and I know they don't even realize right now that this burden they're carrying, they don't have to. And how can I help? What can I do? And just like you said about your own career in life, then all of a sudden I was partnering with God and saying, this is what I'm seeing. And I know you see more and you see more clearly and longer than I see, but this is what I'm seeing. And I'm willing to be a sacrifice to help this person if I can. Can you give me an idea? And then also, if you can give me some courage to act on that idea, that will probably be outside of my comfort zone. And my prayers for this person have changed ever since. And it doesn't feel now, again, maybe that yoke being easy, I don't feel like I'm shouldering the burden or carrying the load or trying to help fix anything about this person. I'm really saying, like, God, I want to give what I can to help and to bless and to benefit. But I feel his light. The burden feels like glory and illumination, and the path seems clearer. It's not so dark and scary anymore. And I think when you realize that that's the power prayer has, it becomes addicting, right? It's like, I can't stop because every time worry comes to my mind, I'm like, no, I just go talk to my partner about this and he'll have some ideas and I'll do the best I can. But we can worry less as women and do more. And I'm sure in your situation, one of the questions I wanted to ask having to do with that prophecy is you were doing some of the heaviest, hardest work. And so to do it in a way that felt happy, how was that for you? And what I'm, challenging when you're seeing people who are unhoused or who have physical deformity or whatever to say, how can I do this in happy ways? When sometimes just the grief of what's happening after a natural disaster, there isn't a lot of happy right in front of you.
I had a couple of experiences where somebody close to me died, and you're just filled with grief. One of them was a 38-year-old, and she was just too young to die. She left two little children, and just thought, how is that fair? How can that happen? And as I was processing that grief, and it's really easy to just keep throwing out those, why did you do this? Why did this happen? And why? And it feels so heavy, and I'm so sad. I'm so upset about this. And one of the things that I learned through my process of that grief was she didn't come back to life. He didn't take away the burden of that. What he did, Jesus, was just sit by me. He didn't take the situation away, but he just said, but you don't have to be alone in this situation. I'm going to be with you. And a lot of times the impression that I have was, he's not even talking to me. He's just a presence that's right next to me. And a lot of times in humanitarian work, you cannot adjust in a significant way the circumstances. They are what they are. This poverty is here. We're trying to get somebody into school. We're trying to help people get food or medical care, and that's an important thing. But sometimes the most important thing we give to them is just our presence, that somebody who cares about them won't leave them by themselves. I cannot change everything about this, but I won't leave you. I'm going to be with you. And in some ways, that lifts more of the burden than the intervention that we're trying to give. It's important to give food and schooling and medical care because that's how people thrive. But one of the most basic things we can be to somebody is say, I won't leave you. I will sit right next to you and I won't go anywhere. My relationship with you is solid. I'm not going to just come and then go. I'm going to stay with you. That kind of human connection is the most important humanitarian work, if you want to call it that we give. It means the most. It changes the most.
When you talk in your book about you give you don't call them this, but in a sense, kind of warnings, and you're generous about saying these are from lessons I've learned of ways not to do it. But I love what you just said. I'm going to actually back up and say this. One of my fears about this podcast and thinking about, I hope I do this right, because if I don't do it right, you'll do it right. I wasn't worried about you. I don't want women to be afraid to jump in. And knowing that you can make mistakes and knowing that there are pitfalls in humanitarian work, and sometimes you can do more harm than good. That's scary to think of when all you want to do is good, right? There's real corruption and there's real issues in humanitarian work. But if you're coming with a heart of love and trying to do your best and you know you could maybe mess something up, I don't want women to say, oh, now I really don't feel like I can do something right. But I think what you just said for me, for anyone just starting out who may have this fear of, I don't know how to do it perfect enough or big enough, or I don't know their history or whatever. If you just are with people and you're not judging, you're not even giving them a solution, maybe you don't even bring anything. One thing I think it's hard to mess up is presence.
That's a great point.
Like being there.
I titled this book from a very famous quote by Mother Teresa, and everybody knows that. The full quote is, "We can't all do great things, but we can do small things with great love." And for me, the emphasis isn't on the thing that we're giving, the small thing. It's on the way that we're giving it. It's the empathy, the love, the presence that we're giving it with. You think about her ministry, because she's working with those untouchables in India, and they're dying, they're coming in, and she will be with them for the last hours of their life. So she welcomes people in, she gives them human touch, she bathes them, she puts them in clean clothes, tucks them into bed, helps them write their last letters, holds their hand while they go. She's not changing the fact that they are going to leave this earth and all the other things that, may be left undone. But her presence is with them. She's trying to give them, with the love of God, the best that she can, that they won't be alone. And I think what you said is the absolute truth. We make mistakes all the time. We mess things up. We don't say the right things, or we don't do the right things. But it's really hard to mess up presence. That my intent is to be here with you and to be good. And think of the people in your life who have been there for you, and the difference that makes.
Especially when they just show up with, "I don't have any answers. I just know that this is a hard time for you. And I'm just here."
Yeah.
I think that's a very sacred space.
Me too.
So I would love to get into a few principles and the remainder of our time together. And mostly I would just love if you'd share a few stories and how you got to the place where you are sitting now at a different part of your career. But I do have a few questions that I want to ask. But again, I want to reiterate for those of you listening in, yes, there are pitfalls and there's things that we could do, sometimes good, better, best, and sometimes worse. But if your intentions are there, this is a great place to go to God. And again, I would highly recommend this book. And that is not just a platitude, or Sharon's here in my studio, and so we're talking about it, but it really breaks things down that you can avoid some of the challenges that maybe Sharon had or that other people have had in this work. The book lays it out so beautifully, but thank you for taking decades of wisdom to distill down so we don't have to do things in a way that's like, man, if only I would have known. If only I would have had some insight beforehand on the people or on the better way to ask questions or the better way to show up, I would have done it differently. This book will help you avoid a lot of that. So one of the quotes from the book, I really struggled because there were so many sections I wanted to read and paragraphs that I just loved. But let's start with this question, or this statement that you made. Money isn't the determining factor for charitable success. Can you share that a little bit? Because again, thinking about barriers, why don't women act? One is just fear. I don't exactly know what to do. One may be I'm too busy. One may be I'm too involved in other things in my life. It could be truly I have no extra time. We've talked about stages of life where that's accurate. But I think a big one is I just don't really have that much to give. If money isn't the determining factor, what are some of the determining factors? And I know a lot of the book goes into this.
We think, I think in humanitarian terms, in terms of the things I have to offer. And I have cash, I have things, and I have time, and maybe some expertise. So, those are some of the things that we have to offer. And sometimes we think, what I have is so small, it isn't enough. But one of the things that is not included in that equation, and I think it's the most important thing that we have to offer, is that most people in the world are caught in situations that are being degraded by corruption. In other words, you put money into that situation, but it gets siphoned off by criminals or by extortion or just it doesn't reach the people that it needs to reach. And there are a lot of people in the world who don't have a single person in their life that they can trust. There's nobody that they can trust. And I put this story in the book, and it really was evocative to me when I learned it. It was expensive to put photos in the book, so these were the only photos that I chose to put. This is a family named Tadessa that I met in Ethiopia, and she had belonged to a borrowing group. So as she belongs to this savings group, she and 24 of her neighbors get together, and they get together once a week, and they've committed to save 50 cents. So she's coming up with 50 cents, and they have a metal box that has a top, and it has 3 padlocks on it. And so whenever they open that box, 3 people have to be present to be able to protect the funding. And then in the meeting, everybody puts their 50 cents in there. Well, at the end of 3 months, they have $75. So then the question is, what should we do with our money? And she was able to take a little loan. First, she bought chickens and started selling the eggs and eating the eggs. Then she bought a goat that they fattened up and then they sold at Easter time. Then they put in fruit trees and they started selling the fruit. They put in a little well. But they made these different things as she's saving her 50 cents and borrowing against her group. At the end of 7 years, and this is where I had come to visit them, they bought a cow and they didn't have a place to put the cow, so they decided to put the cow in their own house. So it's one of those rondavel thatched houses. And then they built themselves a big plaster house and they painted it this coral color, just so bright. And, it stands out in the trees. They were so proud of this. And the day that I went to visit them, they have a banner, a cloth banner across the front door. And I said, "What does that say?" She said, "Oh, it's congratulations because our son has just graduated as a teacher and our daughter just graduated as a pharmacist." And I thought, here is a family who was enthralled to moneylenders. Anytime they didn't have enough money to buy food for that day, they had to borrow and they paid 100% interest. They don't have any other person in their life to trust. But because she participated in this little borrowing group, and they got different things and everything, but the most important thing she got out of that, there were 24 other people that lived around her that were trustworthy. And they kicked 2 people out of the group because they weren't trustworthy. But she now has a group of people that they can give each other advice, and it isn't corrupt. They're helping each other. And you can't pour resources into things that's full of corruption. You have to find organizations or people or circles where there's enough trustworthiness that they'll hold each other accountable. And for her, that little group was trustworthy. And so I have money, resource, and time that I can give, but the most important thing I can give is that I'm trustworthy. I won't lie to you. I won't steal from you. I won't take advantage of you. And I think in lots of ways, boy, we need that. You don't have to go to Africa or Asia to be able to do that. We need that right in our community right now because there's so many people that don't feel like they have anybody to trust or anybody who has their back. And that's a great thing that we can give.
And a great reminder that as you're doing this work and knowing there's limitations to how you can show up, is being trustworthy is so ultimately important that don't overpromise what you can do there. Mm-hmm. Because then the whole thing will be soured, right? So show up with what you can have and be honest about that because they may just need to know that they have an honest person there.
Yeah. Money is important and lots of things happen because of money, but it's not the determining factor. Trust is the determining factor.
So beautiful. Okay, I want to get into this section that I just love. You're most powerful where you live. And you have a section of the book. I know a lot of people love to take trips with their family or with friends to go do service, and you didn't say that's a terrible idea. There's maybe more effective ideas, and you gave some great advice on if you are choosing to do trips, here's some great ways to do it. And I would recommend that section of the book. Our family was just in Peru, and it actually wasn't a service trip. We hiked the Inca Trail, and it was phenomenal. But even in that experience, just going to a foreign culture, to take the time to reflect after with some of those questions you provided in the book, I thought were really, really helpful. But thinking about, I think one of the perks of doing service where you're not is that if you mess it up or if you're not generally an outgoing person, you can kind of go show up for a week and be whatever you want to be. You can give the money, you can have a really happy personality, you can do things you're uncomfortable with. Maybe you're working with a type of a sickness or a living circumstance that's not typically where you are, and you can do it for a week and you can commit for a week to go do that thing. But when you show up when it's your neighbors, you have a reputation and they kind of know some of your business and who are you to show up at someone's house, or if it's someone across town, you can't say, well, I came all the way from across the country to help you. It's like, well, I just live a couple blocks over. And it ironically feels harder in a lot of ways to say, well, what are the needs of my own local community? And who are the people I don't normally associate with or even see that may be struggling with things that maybe I could show up and be present for and offer something to because I have time or whatever the resource I have. What is your recommendation? Because it does feel more intimidating in some strange way.
You're exactly right. It feels much harder to do things in our own community. And the reason it doesn't feel hard when it's in a foreign country is that we don't understand all those cultural things that are going on. We're only there for a week, so we see things in terms of black and white. It feels very clean to us. If I just do this thing during this week, it will solve this problem. It doesn't. You know, it sometimes it creates a boomerang thing of things we never intended, but we don't see it because we've gone home. And so it, of course, is messier because we understand the language, we have the long-term relationships, the cultural dynamics are all going on, and we feel those things, we see them. We don't necessarily see those things when we're in a place for a short amount of time. The most important thing you get when you're in a short amount of time is not the thing that you give, but the relationship with that person. Hopefully you keep the relationship with that. But for us to handle the messy, difficult things in our circle, that's our stewardship. We're placed in the place where we are so because we are powerful where we live and we can do things here. And yeah, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, it's messy. It is in Peru also. You just don't know about it because you haven't been there a long time.
Yep.
So tackle that. You know, we're women of energy and faith, so let's understand it and let's do it. I was visiting in Logan for a book group and I was really impressed. There were 100 women. They each commit to give $100 every quarter. And then they have whatever that is. And they have all these agencies come and present to them about things and then they decide what they want to fund. And they do it 4 times a year. So I would commit $400, but it's in scale with everybody else. And then we learn about all these agencies, all these issues that are going on right in the valley where we live, and then we do something about it. And they come back and report to us. I loved that model. You didn't need a lot of money. It was local, and they were energetic and working with each other to solve issues that were right there in the valley where they lived.
That is so brilliant.
And their name, 100 Women in Cache Valley Who Care. That's the name of their organization.
I hope one of them is listening
I
in.
hope
And
so,
if so,
too.
I love you. And I hope 100 more groups like you pop up all over the place.
Invite them on your show.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it would
Okay.
be fun
I
to have
actually
them.
would be so fun. And I think, again, one of the reasons it's hard in person is because I just don't have enough for it to make a difference. But same with the borrowing club or the borrowing group that you talked about, 50 cents, it won't compound fast enough for me to get a cow or to pay for something. But think of all the benefits of doing it with women you love. I mean, just the sisterhood alone is what so many women are hoping for right now. Like the loneliness is maybe one of the biggest epidemics, right? We hear that. So being able to give in all the ways, to have the sisterhood, to do it together, to be presented to also feels really fun. Like, well, it's only $100, but I feel pretty important because I'm making a choice, which you also talk about as being important both from when you're the giver and the receiver of the power and importance of choice. I am obsessed with this idea. Reach out, women from Cache Valley, and talk to me about this.
Now, I have to tell you a story because I was sitting at a baby shower, and the woman I was sitting next to, I said, just tell me about you. And she was passionate about women's education. She lives right here in Utah. And she said she put out on Instagram that if people would donate for a scholarship fund, she and her husband would match it, whatever it was. And she's a young mom. I think she has 1 child. She said people donated enough for a half a scholarship. She was so disappointed. So they matched it, it made 1. And she just felt like, oh, this was a failure. And then her husband said, but a woman who wasn't going to go to school just went to school last semester because of this little thing that we did. And she realized, she said, one person is one person's life. And I was thinking maybe I would do 20 or 25, but I did 1, and I feel really proud about that because it made a difference for that woman and her children. And I think sometimes we have an idea in our mind of the scale of something we're going to do, and so we discount the fact that we did something that was smaller and it felt like a failure. It's never a failure when you impact somebody in that way. We can feel good about it.
I've talked about that often, actually, when I feel those little directions from God, the things you talked about in your career. And it's like, okay, I don't know how this is going to work, but I can't deny I'm feeling something here. Very often, I then presuppose the scale. Mm-hmm. Well, if it's important enough for me to feel an impression around this is going to be an important thing I'm doing. And then inevitably, it's not what I think it is. And I can't see the long-term view, so I can't see how that one woman impacts or how it impacted my own heart or how I met someone that I never would have met all the ways God can work. And
because he loves the unlikely.
Because he loves the unlikely. And because he sees scale so differently than we do.
Yeah.
So don't let that stop you if it's just that one woman oh, good heavens, what if you were just that one woman?
Yeah.
How it would change you. Oh, what so beautiful. I hope a lot of women and men listening in are taking some small takeaway of something small we can do today, right now, right? Or in this next chapter or season of life. One thing that was surprisingly emotional for me reading the book was getting to the place where you talked about volunteerism and everyday service, and then you recommended Just Serve, which I know Just Serve. I've been on the platform. But I thought, why don't I just scan? Because I haven't been on for a while. I think I first went on when it was newly introduced. And there were a couple options, but I was living in Connecticut at the time. It wasn't as connected. And there just wasn't enough there to kind of keep me on it, right? And I went on and I just started reading opportunity after opportunity, every one of which was very small, a few hours here or doing something there. And there was one that was on there. It was a group in Utah. Right now we're filming, it's January. They're looking for 300 volunteers in February, on February 14th on Valentine's Day. And they're providing all the roses, and they've collected names of widows who would love to receive roses on Valentine's Day. And you show up for the 2 hours, and there's the station where you pick up your roses, and then you go and you deliver these flowers. And I am on Just Serve, and I am just like tears running down my face. I'm like, that is what we mean by scale. That's actually how God's work is done. Now, these roses won't change their lives, and they're not going to plant them to become a rose tree that will provide shade for the next generation. It's one moment and one day for one woman, or maybe a handful that you get to go serve. But I thought, man, do I take my daughter? Should I take my sons? Should I take my new teenage daughter and her friends? Like, who would this have the most beautiful experience for? And right away I was like, that's it. That's it. And I wanted to share it with everyone, just from reading this. But for some reason, that experience encapsulated to me just like, this is the type of thing to look for, and to look for it locally. And maybe that leads for someone else to say, maybe I volunteer with that cause. Maybe I start doing that at other times of year. We find other needs of these widows. We go read to them. But even if it never does, the feeling that you have in your heart that you're not alone, that the Savior's walking beside you and right there with you, that is what it does.
I'm so grateful that you brought up Just Serve, because it's been around 14 years. And a lot of people, our goal is that everybody can use it. It's free, and it creates that feeling that that you felt. Nobody should be, nobody's going to send missionaries to you if you sign up on Just Serve. Nobody's harvesting your information behind it. But it should be available, and people ask, so why does the church do it? What's your interest in sponsoring it? Our interest in sponsoring it is that we're so polarized and we're so fragmented in our world that if we don't have a mechanism to be able to connect with people that we wouldn't know any other way, we're so much poorer as a community. Our goal is that community fabric gets woven back together. And the only way that we know how to do that is to post a project that you could go meet a widow. Maybe her husband died that last year. You bring her a flower on Valentine's Day. She feels remembered. You wouldn't do that on your own, but here's an opportunity to do it. And as they stack up all over the world in different places, those acts have meaning. They make our communities better. That's what I care about. And if you use Just Serve, great. If you don't use Just Serve, fine. But find a way to build a bridge to somebody in your community. That's the piece that's the most important.
I mean, we have so many options. We can start a women who care groups here in our local areas. We can get on Just Serve. And I think it is good advice to find groups doing things. I'm someone who's like, well, I've got to start the project and I've got to start the 501c3, or it's not like I'm really, again, back to the scale thing, or I haven't really done something. But how beautiful that if you're in this phase where maybe time has just opened up for you to say, all these organizations are already doing it. They've already learned hard lessons. If I volunteer for 5 hours, I probably get a pretty good taste if that's something that I'd be interested in. Maybe I start something because there's a hole that I then realize is in my community, or maybe I just give the time there that I can. But so many people are doing great things. You don't have to solve all the problems, even in your own local community, just because you're most powerful where you live.
And I loved what you said. Who can I take with me? Because that's the second step. I'll get involved, and who can I take with me? Because if we're interested in addressing mental health concerns among young people, service is an enormous part of that. And the fact that you would take a son or a cousin or a neighbor with you, there's so much beauty in that. 50 good things are going to come because you took somebody with you.
Well, February 14th, that's going to be part of my Valentine's Day.
I
And I'm
can't
already
wait for
excited.
that.
So as we end, one, I would love to just get a little bit of a scope, and this is going to be hard to do. And I wanted to ask this earlier in the episode of what your role was. And for those maybe who aren't familiar with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, what are they doing and why are they doing it? And I will add, for those of you who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, this also might be really interesting. I just went and toured a few of the facilities earlier this week because a dear friend just set it up and didn't know I was interviewing you 2 days later. So the timing of it all was really beautiful. And then I'm going to end with one parting question, but give us a little bit of the scope. Is this what the church is doing? Is this lots of churches do the same thing. And this isn't to put the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints up on a pedestal, but I think it's important to understand, where is money going if I'm paying fast offerings, if I am a member of this faith? Is it just to my own? Is it what is and then also those who aren't of the faith, can I lean on maybe the charity and support of this church if I don't have that in my life and I don't have that same support or a church?
For us who believe in modern prophets, I think it's a critical piece to understand. A prophet is a prophet for the whole world. He's not a prophet just for the place where he lives. He's not a prophet just for the people in his faith. He has stewardship before God for everybody. And so the church has always been interested in fulfilling that prophetic mandate to care for poor people, or to love God and to love our neighbors. So what's the evidence that we do that? And in the early church, when they had refugees coming in, they had debt, they didn't have the ability. And you've got Joseph Smith saying, whether in this church or in no church at all, any other church or no church at all, we want to carry people on our backs and help them because it's part of our mandate. And he couldn't really, he was limited in the ways he could do that. But 200 years later, we're much less limited in the ways that we can do that. Churches, the Relief Society sent grain to China when they had a famine in 1906. They sent wheat to San Francisco when the fire burned all the bakeries down so that they could start having bread again in the city. We've always had a mandate. But since 1985, the church has an organization, Humanitarian Services, where I work, that is actively building partnerships with other people and keeping track of the emergencies that are happening and the trends and the ways that we could spend the donations that members of the church give in a way that would be powerful, and who can we partner with, and what kinds of things can we do over a short term or then over a long term. And I'm grateful to have lived through the time when the 27 international or area offices, those area presidencies make their priorities, and they have a section of the funding. But President Nelson at the time said, I want one thing that will be on behalf of the entire church. And the thing that he selected was the well-being of women and children. And he put the Relief Society presidency in charge of that, as they have historically been. So you'll see President Johnson and her successors talking about the well-being of women and children, the nutrition, the water that they drink, their access to health care when the baby is born, prenatal vitamins. And every child deserves to have that early beginning, and that's safe and secure, because they have gifts inside of them that are unique. And if they are not nourished in a way that they can share their gifts, the world is so much poorer. So that's if you went to some of those facilities, hopefully you saw ways that we're trying to do that. And you think, well, that's great in Nepal or Ghana or places like that. But I live in North Salt Lake. What should I do? And the Relief Society has a thing, and you can link to it on the program. They have 25 things that you can do right where you live. And part of them is, kids that eat that eat food from the food bank. They're eating ramen. They're eating macaroni and cheese. They're not getting nutrition that they need. And the United States is 17th when it comes to maternal deaths among all developed countries. We have issues that we have not dealt with here, even though we have strong medical care. People don't get the access that they need. So there's a lot of things that we can do in our own communities that would make a difference.
So beautiful. And being on those tours, I was blown away. I've been a member of this same faith for my whole life. I had no idea the type of reach that it was, as outward facing, even more so than it is inward facing to members of our own church. Can you put into context what that looks like compared to other global organizations? Is that a fair question, or a question you can answer?
The church spends about $1 billion a year trying to help people who have an emergency need or a long-term need. But even more importantly, I think there's 6 million volunteer hours that go along with that. We believe in volunteerism, and we do a lot of that. So if you've ever gone to the peach orchard and picked peaches, or gone to the cannery, or you donate to Desert Industries, all of those things feed into that. And you're exactly right. We give about 40% of what's produced in our canneries and farms to members of the church, and about 60% of it goes outward, out to food banks and other people, because of our commitment to, we love God and we love our neighbor, and here's the evidence of that. And I really like that. Around the world where we don't have those farms and ranches, then we use grocery store contracts. We through fast offerings and other donations, if you have a need, somebody will meet with you and you'll get a 2-week card where you can go to the Walmart equivalent and buy 2 weeks worth of groceries to help your family get through. And I'm proud to belong to a church that has taken the mandate, the whole world. You know, we believe in caring for people with money, with goods and services, and with presence, with volunteerism. I'm going to be with you. And of all of those things, the relationship, the being with you, is the most important part of that. And so, you know, people call me and they say, I love humanitarian work. I want to be part of this. What can I do? What advice do you have? And I often say, tell me about the person you minister to, because ministering is exactly the same thing as humanitarian work. It just has a different name. And if we would see our responsibilities in those ways, I think we'd act differently.
You also have a beautiful section of the book. I'm going to just open it to remember how many you'll remember. How many ideas are on the back of your book, the list?
50.
Yeah. So you also have 50 ideas right in the back that says, if you're just trying to figure out where to start, you can look at Just Serve, and you can think about the people in your own neighborhood or in your own family. But here's other prompts.
Read some of those. What are they?
I would love to. Try participating in another faith's holiday or practice. I'm obsessed with that one. I love interfaith work. And who are you going to meet? And what are the people that you're going to be opened up to? And how is your own life and faith going to grow because you do that? Learn a new skill from someone else. That doesn't sound like service. That sounds like someone teaching you. Also service. We have things we would love to teach other people, right? Introduce yourself to a neighbor you don't know. I had a guest on, Bubba Page, who came on, and he is recently divorced, and he was talking about moving to this new neighborhood. They have 8 children and kind of how he's navigating that. And he said he walked around the neighborhood and he knocked doors and he just said, hey, we're new. Here's my family in case you see one of our kids, like you know who they are. And also, I just want to give you my number in case you ever need help. Sometimes, like half the time I have kids with me, half the time I don't. If you ever need help or support, just know if there's mail or if there's something, I'd be happy to help out in a neighborly way. It's so different than saying, hey, I want to introduce myself and it's so good to meet you. Right away, you're saying, I'm here if you need me. Now, they may or may not trust you, and maybe they have to build some trust before they say, I'll leave a house key with you, right?
But they'll remember you.
But they'll remember you and they'll start to see you. And again, thinking about sticking out to people who are looking for something in their life in distinct and different ways and happy ways. So that's a great way, right? Yeah. Just go knock the doors of your neighbors. Most Americans don't know even half their neighbors, let alone one neighbor, is I think the statistic. Resolve a conflict in your life. I mean, these are just so good. And we put service in a box and humanitarian work in a box, but the things that help us connect with other people and be peacemakers and avoid conflict and resolve things, just beautiful. And the 50 are so great. Well, I think everyone who listened in, including myself, is walking away with something in our heart saying, hey, this is a way I can show up. This is something I can do that's maybe for now, for a time, for who knows how long. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the things you brought. And you guys are going to love the book. Hopefully it's back in stock by the time this episode is released so that we can all do what we do in the small things with great love and maybe a little bit better than we would have done otherwise. Final parting question. It's public knowledge. I asked you beforehand that you are going to be stepping out of the role you've been in as director, which I think we can't say enough, just what you gave a little bit of an overview, but it's really, I don't even know how you're sitting in the room with me with the title and with what you do. We don't talk about it enough, to be honest, not that you need the accolades, but I think really what we're doing in this church and also what you're doing as a director is just kind of mind blowing. And people kind of just don't know, which is funny to me. I think the church doesn't want to say a lot of things for a lot of reasons, but I wish we would champion it more personally, because it shows, I think, in a lot of ways that we are who we hope to be, or at least we're taking steps to become more like the people we want to be. What are you taking with you as you leave this role and responsibility?
I've worked for the church 28 years and I've been the director since 2011. It's been such a privilege, like you said, to be able to see up close and personal some of the things that we're working on and doing, caring about, having met all those people. Some of them I wrote about in that book. Retiring is a chance to do something different and new. I'm really excited about that. I'm thrilled about the woman, Elissa Gifford, who will step into my role, because she's been prepared for a long period of time. She's very, very good. And it'll be fun for the church to get to know her. And I would just say, I hope that as, I step away from this formal role where I'm a humanitarian, I have 25 years of my life, say, to still be that kind of a humanitarian. And what will I do? Beyond kits and quilts, as we often think about inside the box, beyond the kits and quilts, what will I do with my mandate and my time? And one of the things I'm taking away from my long career is just don't be afraid. Go ahead and try things. Some of them will work, some of them won't. Be adventurous enough to follow the inspiration that you feel from the Lord. Just don't be afraid. And let's see what happens next. And because the Lord loves the unlikely, and because he loves people who will have him to be their God, let's see what we can do. Because there's so many good people in this world who deserve help, deserve friends, and I want to be the kind of Latter-day Saint that can build a bridge to other people of good faith, and to walk the traffic along that bridge and make it be strong.
What an exciting way to live. To leave one opportunity to say, kind of like we talked about President Nelson with that twinkle in your, like, I don't know, and I can't wait to see. Yeah. I'm as curious and excited as the next person. Well, we can't wait to watch what you do, and thank you for the good that you have done and the countless hours, and my thanks will never be enough, and probably not the thanks of the whole church, because you have taken what we have tried to give and do it in a way that is not really small, but definitely with great love, and taught us how to do it along the way. So thank you.
I want to thank you too, that to have Lean In with Lizzy and to have these discussions with all kinds of different people, and to share that in our community, so that we get to listen in on people that we wish were our best friends, and we feel like we're best friends with you. Thank you for the ministry that you have, and the closeness to inspiration that you have brought. So thank you.
That is very generous. Thank you. Pleasure to have you on the show. We will link the book and obviously direct people to your socials account to keep tabs on what you're going to do next.
Thank you.
We can't wait. Thank you for coming.
It was great to be here.
As we wrap up, I hope you felt what I felt in this conversation, a sense of calm, clarity, and ready to act. If this episode resonated with you, I can't recommend Sharon's book enough, Doing Small Things with Great Love. It helps you trust that what you have to give right now actually matters, and shows you how to give it with love, wisdom, and dignity. This book is practical, deeply spiritual, and incredibly grounding. It will help you serve in ways that are meaningful and sustainable right where you are. If you've been asking, what does God want me to do next, or how do I show up without burning out, this book is a beautiful place to start. Go find Doing Small Things with Great Love by Sharon Eubank, and I truly hope you do. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week.